Dishonorable discharge, the harshest punishment in military life. But when bombs were exploding on the military base, while the EOD team watched helplessly, that man approached the explosive device alone and said, "They called me a traitor. But the real traitor is still free." That day would change James Patterson's life forever, because the commander who had convicted him 12 years ago was now serving at the same base, and only Jimmy could neutralize the bombs. Hello. Welcome to the Last Stand channel. Have you or your family members served in the military? Share your experiences in the comments. James Jimmy Patterson had been working as a maintenance technician at Fort Carson Military Base for 12 years. 39 years old, his hair starting to gray, his hands stained with motor oil and metal dust. Military personnel knew him, but nobody talked to him much. Jimmy had strange quirks, but nobody paid attention to them. When checking electrical panels, he was extremely careful, as if there might be a bomb inside. Before touching any wires, he would always stop and look for a long time. His strangest habit was knowing the layout of every building on base by heart. Which rooms had how many people working, where the emergency exits were, how the electrical systems were connected. While knowing these things seemed necessary for his job, the level of detail was more than what a normal technician would need. Jimmy's biggest secret was that nobody knew he had served at Fort Carson before. 12 years ago, he had worked at the same base as Staff Sergeant James Patterson, an EOD specialist. Back then, his uniform was sharp, his eyes full of hope. But now he was different. His civilian clothes, work gloves, and silence hid his true identity. When he came to his morning shift and passed by the old EOD building, his steps would slow down. He had too many memories there. The young soldiers on base only knew him as Jimmy the technician, but occasionally some older officers would give him strange looks, as if they had seen him before. Jimmy would notice these looks, lower his head, and focus on his work. 3 months ago, a new commander had been assigned to Fort Carson, Colonel Frank Daniels. When Jimmy heard this name, his blood ran cold. Because Colonel Daniels had been the presiding officer of his court-martial 12 years ago. The first day Jimmy saw Colonel Daniels on base, he had immediately fled. But he couldn't run forever. Daniels would notice him sooner or later. Colonel Daniels was a strong, disciplined officer. The soldiers respected him, but Jimmy knew his true face. 12 years ago in that courtroom, he couldn't forget the determination in Daniels' eyes. Staff Sergeant Patterson. He had said that day, "The court finds you guilty of negligence and violation of military duty." 2012, Helmand Province, Afghanistan. Jimmy and his team were on an IED clearance mission. According to intel, there were 3 bombs on the village road. It should have been a simple mission, but something had gone wrong. Jimmy had successfully neutralized the first bomb, and while checking the second one, Sergeant Kevin Walsh had approached. "Jimmy, hurry up. This area isn't secure," Kevin had said. Jimmy was working carefully. But then something happened. The bomb exploded. Kevin and 3 other soldiers died. Jimmy was wounded but survived. Everything had developed rapidly after that. Investigation, accusations, court-martial, and finally dishonorable discharge. During the trial, Jimmy's lawyer had mentioned the possibility of sabotage. The bomb's timer appeared to have been tampered with, but the evidence was insufficient. Lieutenant Ryan Clark had been Jimmy's teammate at the time. He had testified against Jimmy in court. Patterson was acting recklessly, Clark had said. "He violated protocol. That's why our friends died." Jimmy had shouted that day, "You're setting me up. I didn't sabotage that bomb." But nobody had believed him. October 28th morning, alarms started ringing at Fort Carson. Jimmy was working in the electrical room when he heard the sirens. Then came the base-wide announcement. "All personnel to emergency positions. There is a security threat on base. Everyone remain in current positions." Jimmy's heart started racing. He had heard these kinds of alarms often in Afghanistan. But hearing them here on American soil was very disturbing. Fragments were coming from his radio. Suspicious packages, multiple locations, evacuate. Jimmy was slowly beginning to understand. There was a bomb threat on base. Panic reigned in the base command center. Colonel Daniels was assessing the situation in an emergency meeting. "Sir, suspicious packages have been found at 3 different locations." said Major Wilson. Barracks, command center, and commissary. Where's the EOD team? Daniels asked. Sir, the main EOD team is off base for training. We only have 2 junior specialists, but they're not ready for this level of complexity. Daniels' face tensed. There was no experienced EOD specialist on base to handle a threat of this seriousness. Where's the closest EOD support? Sir, at least 3 hours from Peterson Air Force Base. 3 hours was too long. If these were real bombs, they might have timers. Jimmy was listening to base communications. Understanding the seriousness of the situation, he acted without hesitation. He left the electrical room and started walking toward the command center. Base personnel tried to stop him. Hey, civilian personnel should go to the evacuation zone. I'm an EOD specialist, Jimmy said quietly. The soldier was surprised. What do you mean? I can handle the bombs. These words quickly reached the command center. A few minutes later, Jimmy found himself in Colonel Daniels' office. When Colonel Daniels saw Jimmy, he narrowed his eyes. There was a long silence. You're Staff Sergeant Patterson. Former Staff Sergeant. Jimmy said calmly, Now just Jimmy, what do you want here? There's a bomb threat on base. I can help. Daniels laughed bitterly. You? I was the one who convicted you of negligence. 4 of our soldiers died because of your mistake. Jimmy's jaw tightened. Colonel, right now there are 200 soldiers on base and there's a bomb threat. We can put our personal issues aside. You're no longer EOD. You're a civilian technician. But I can still neutralize bombs. Major Wilson entered the room, his face worried. Sir, we're hearing ticking sounds from one of the packages. Could be a timer. Daniel's face went pale. He had no other choice. Patterson, he said, if you cause harm to this base. I won't, Jimmy said. I promise. As Jimmy left the command center, the entire base was watching him. He walked toward the old EOD building. 12 years later, he was passing through that door. The EOD equipment was still there. Blast suit, wire cutters, detection devices. As Jimmy put them on, old muscle memory returned. The first bomb had been found in the barracks building. When Jimmy approached with his equipment, he could see the package. An old-style suitcase, but very suspicious. As Jimmy approached the suitcase, he calculated every step. He X-rayed the inside. Plastic explosives, timer device, and metal fragmentation ball bearings. This is real, he said into the radio. Professional job. He looked at the timer. 47 minutes, 23 seconds. Jimmy's hands started trembling. He remembered Kevin Walsh's death 12 years ago. What if he made a mistake again? Focus, he said to himself. For Kevin, for the others. Inside the bomb were 4 wires. Red, blue, yellow, green. Jimmy had to find which one controlled the timer. While tracing the circuit, he noticed something. This bomb design seemed familiar. It had the same signature as bombs he'd seen in Afghanistan. This style, I've seen this before. Jimmy worked carefully. He tested each wire with a multimeter. The blue wire went to the timer, but there could also be a trap wire. Hands steady, breathing controlled. Jimmy cut the blue wire. The timer stopped. Bomb number 1 neutralized, he said into the radio. Applause was heard on base. The second bomb was in the basement of the command center. When Jimmy got there, he saw this bomb was more complex. Dual timer system, multiple wire network, and booby trap possibility. This is more advanced, he said. Whoever's making these has expertise. While Jimmy worked, Colonel Daniels came beside him. Patterson, how much time do we have? 29 minutes. But this bomb is more dangerous. Should we start evacuation? No, sir. Movement could trigger the bomb. As Jimmy worked on the bomb, Daniels watched. For the first time in 12 years, he was seeing Jimmy's true skill. This bomb was different. The maker didn't just want destruction, but had also created a puzzle. As Jimmy traced each wire, he tried to understand the bomb designer's psychology. This person has military training, Jimmy said. They know EOD countermeasures. Daniels was surprised. What do you mean? Whoever made these bombs knows our tactics. There's inside information. A terrible possibility formed in Jimmy's mind. What if the bomber was an insider? Just then, news came over the radio. 3rd package found in the commissary. 3 bombs. Coordinated effort. Definitely an inside job. While Jimmy was neutralizing the second bomb, he noticed a pattern in the wire configuration. He had seen this exact arrangement in Afghanistan. In 2012, in the bomb that killed Kevin Walsh, Jimmy's hand trembled. "This is impossible." "What's wrong, Patterson?" Daniels said. "This bomb has the same signature as the bomb that killed Kevin." Daniels' expression changed. "What do you mean?" "Sir, that bomb in Afghanistan was made by this same person." After Jimmy neutralized the second bomb, he understood the truth. 12 years ago, he had been blamed, but the real bomber was still free, and now that bomber was at Fort Carson. Jimmy and Daniels ran to the command center. Intelligence Officer Major Wilson was giving a briefing. "Sir, we've reviewed security footage. The person who placed the packages has base access." "Who?" Daniels said. "Still investigating, sir." Jimmy was scared thinking about it. Who was in Afghanistan 12 years ago? Who would know this bomb signature? Then it came to him, Lieutenant Ryan Clark. Clark had been Jimmy's teammate at the time. He had access to bomb making. And he had testified against Jimmy in court. "Colonel," Jimmy said, "where's Lieutenant Clark?" Daniels frowned. "Clark is a major now. Why?" "He was also on duty with us in Afghanistan. He knows these bomb techniques." Major Clark was entering the commissary at that moment. He had said he came to inspect the third bomb. But Jimmy's suspicion was correct. Clark wasn't there to neutralize the bomb, but to trigger it. Jimmy and Daniels ran to the commissary. When they found Clark next to the bomb, he was accelerating the timer. "Clark, stop!" Daniels shouted. Clark turned around, holding a remote trigger in his hand. "Too late, Colonel. I'm going to expose this base's corrupt system." "Was it you?" Jimmy said. "The one who killed Kevin in Afghanistan?" Clark laughed. "Kevin got too close to the truth. You were innocent, Patterson, but you made a convenient scapegoat." As Clark was about to press the trigger, Jimmy attacked him. The two fell to the ground. The trigger flew across the floor. "You're a monster," Jimmy said. "Kevin was innocent. Kevin was an idealistic fool." Clark shouted. He was questioning what we were doing in Afghanistan. While Jimmy and Clark fought, Daniels tried to get the trigger device. But the bomb timer showed only 3 minutes. "Patterson, the bomb." Jimmy knocked out Clark and ran to the bomb. Would 3 minutes be enough to save 200 lives? The last bomb was the most complex. Multiple failsafes, secondary trigger, and anti-tampering device. Jimmy's 12 years of suppressed expertise was now at full power. Every wire, every circuit, every timing mechanism. Everything he had learned in Afghanistan was now engaged. "I can't stop the timer," he said, "but I can disconnect the explosive." 1 minute 47 seconds. Jimmy's hands worked with machine precision. Sweat was dripping, but his concentration was perfect. "Patterson," Daniels said, "I'm sorry. You were right in Afghanistan." Jimmy stopped at that moment. These were the words he had been waiting 12 years to hear. "Focus, Patterson. Timer." With 43 seconds remaining, Jimmy cut the last wire. The explosive was neutralized. The timer reached 0, but there was no explosion. Jimmy collapsed to the ground. The burden he had carried for 12 years had finally lifted from his shoulders. "You're a hero, Patterson," Daniels said, "both in Afghanistan and today." Base personnel greeted Jimmy with applause. But Jimmy was only thinking about Kevin Walsh. Finally, his friend's name had been cleared. 2 weeks later, there was a ceremony at the Pentagon. Jimmy wore his old uniform, pinned on his medals. The Secretary of Defense said, "Staff Sergeant James Patterson, thanks to your courage and expertise, the lives of 200 military personnel were saved. Your service record in Afghanistan has also been reviewed. The charges have been dropped." As Jimmy received his medal, he saw Kevin Walsh's family in the audience. They were applauding too. "Kevin," Jimmy whispered. Finally, the truth came out. James Patterson now serves as EOD chief at Fort Carson. He wears his old blast suit, sharing his bomb disposal expertise with the new generation. Colonel Daniels became his closest ally. "We made a big mistake 12 years ago," he said, "but now we're trying to do what's right." If you enjoy these powerful stories, don't forget to subscribe to the Last Stand channel. We'll continue bringing you more hero stories every day. And remember, sometimes the greatest heroes are the quietest ones. Truth always prevails.